Hey everyone, this is Jacob, the host of the Three Circle Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. Please leave a comment if you get some out of the video, or even if you don't. I hope you stick along for the whole episode, and I'll talk to you after. Hey Andrew, welcome to the show.
Jacob, pleasure to be here, brother.
Awesome. So, guys, welcome to episode 2 of the Three Circle Podcast. We'll be talking about practical spirituality today and kind of balancing that with modern life and kind of how tricky that balance has been. So, Andrew, just introduce yourself a little, give yourself a little bit of background so our viewers kind of know who you are and kind of what you do.
Yes. Thank you, Jacob. I am a men's coach here in Austin, Texas. I focus on helping men overcome their mental health. And I do that through a trauma-informed lens, a holistic approach, how I lived through my experience with bipolar disorder, anxiety, and depression. So I'm here to share that and serve that to other men. I also have a men's mastermind here in Austin. And yeah, looking to build that out even more. That's a true passion of mine. Yeah, brother, there's lots more to share, but that's the meat.
Cool, man. It's exciting. So get right into it. Yeah, topic for today: practical spirituality. Right. I know the term gets thrown around a lot, like this big wooey thing out there, and either you have to go off to Nepal or to Peru, right, and do an ayahuasca trip. That's spirituality, right? But not all of us have the money, or the time, or the resources to do that, right? So I have really been pondering recently: how do we use spirituality, or how do we find it in our everyday lives? Like if you're busy, right, you're starting a new job, you're moving, you're fighting with your girlfriend, what are those topics or little pearls of wisdom that you can bring, not so much from those experiences, but by going to a breathwork class or joining a men's group, right? Like, what have you learned through your experiences that are kind of some everyday things that people can do?
It's such a great question, and yet extremely complicated. It's like condensing the mystery of life into practicality
Yes.
in and of itself is a real challenge.
Hmm.
So first of all, it's an honor to speak about this because making spirituality practical is hard. It's
Hmm.
hard to do. So I know you and I are not alone in that seeking. I'm even curious to hear you define what that means. What is practical spirituality from your perspective?
So practical spirituality for mine is tools or a mindset or even a way you view, a lens through which you view the world, that every day I can connect with something greater than myself that allows me to navigate life's challenges without having to retreat into addiction or unhealthy coping mechanisms or substances, like, right. So healthy, connecting with other people, going to men's groups, like working out, in nature, like what are those things that you have found?
Uh, I mean, you touched on a host of them that are incredibly pivotal in my foundation for my sobriety, my mental
Mhm.
health,
Mhm.
and my spirituality.
Mhm.
So not to overlook that, like it can be as simple as going into nature and
Mhm.
listening to the silence that exists all around us when we're, you know, in that presence. Um, I would say men's work has been huge. I wouldn't, it's not exclusive to spirituality per se, but
Mhm.
I think everything at this time is infused with a sense of spirituality on a very practical basis. Man, I know you're a monster in your morning routines, and
Mhm.
so am I. I've done habit tracking for 1,000 days. I've diligently, regimentally measured to become the person that I am now, and
Mhm.
I'm proud of. And that has evolved over time. I used to meditate in a bit of seeking that stillness and that communication with the higher power and that communion,
Mhm.
and coming posturing myself from that place through like meditation or breath work, more quote spiritual practices. Um, and now as I've kind of expanded, frankly, it's a really conscious and intentional practice for prayer. You
Mhm.
call it prayer, you call it worship. These terms are relative, but for me, it's just positioning myself in the posture of beloved identity and reminding myself that I am loved. I that's how I came on this planet, and that's who I am, and what I'm here to be. And so whatever that means daily, to remind myself of that, I read the Passion translation of the Bible. That's been a beautiful tool for me to commune with a higher power. And yeah, I mean, there's so much wisdom just in that, and it's taking time to not just be in the doing, but really be with that higher power and communicate with it. There's a reciprocity that exists and is available to us always, and we just kind of have to remember to ask and tap into that. And also in remembering who we are. And so that's where I see a lot of the morning routine coming in. And it's like positioning myself at the beginning of the day to know who I am, know what I bring to this world, and who I'm here to be. And that, I just got to say, this last piece is like, I succeeded by objective terms financially, through career, and I did it on my own. I did it through sheer force and will, and I did it. I can celebrate that. I have that evidence that I'm capable of that. And I just at a certain point realized it wasn't sustainable without the faith, without the belief, without working in alignment with that higher power that I call God or Yahweh or Abba, but it doesn't really matter. My direct red line to God is through Jesus Christ. And so I ask, I'm cultivating a relationship. I want to know this person that Jesus Christ was, that walked this earth. Like, I want to learn from him and receive his stories and the parables, and not take it so literally, not take it practically. So when you originally asked that question, I was sitting with this, like, there's almost it's like a double-edged sword. Like, practical spirituality to me, it's almost the wrong way to think about it. I don't really believe spirituality is practical at all. It's mysterious, it's uncertain, it's potent beyond our wildest imagination. And so to bring it in at a practical level just takes humility, and knowing that I don't have it all figured out, and I have this higher power to connect with always, to help guide me and shepherd me and lead me towards who I'm meant to be, that potential that exists in the future and where I am now. And I know that always it's no sacrifice to me to be more of that person than the person I was in the past, that struggled with addictions, that was throttled with mental illness, that had was reliant on external vices to help me feel something that was greater than myself. And now it's this cultivation of knowing that it's within me and within all of us. That spirituality you're speaking of, it's available to all of us. And coming from that perspective, I can't say it's practical, but what I can say is it's powerful, and it's led to more abundance and more blessings in my life than I've yet to know.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're speaking to the choir here. My lens for spirituality is 12-step, right? So we define God as we understand him, and I've definitely found that through other people, which has been a huge blessing to me, because I've definitely struggled with my fair share of addiction. Still am, to some extent, not nearly as much as it used to be, right? But as we've gotten increasingly disconnected, through technology, through this hustle culture of succeed and drive and push past feelings, right? You're not supposed to feel the feelings, right? You're supposed to just keep going with all these external vices. And a lot of young guys I have found have no idea what they're doing. They're either using porn or weed or painkillers or drinking, right? And what do you think they get wrong when it comes to practicing spirituality in their life? Because I've talked to a lot of them, and they seem to have this concept that doesn't quite match up with my experience. So I'm kind of curious to what you think they're getting wrong when it comes to this.
That's such incredible awareness and perspective, man, because I share that too. I've seen so many, me included, young man in my 20s, no direction, no, I was outsourcing my power to medications, to church, to bosses. And so I deeply relate to that just a sense that a lot of the men are lost, and we're looking for something to soothe this this confusion and this like lack of direction. And yeah, I found it through all of the things that you mentioned as well, and then some, and so that's still living within me to some extent.
Mm.
And to answer your specific question, brother, I what I feel at least is missing in the personal development place, and this is like the thing to me, is a knowing that all of that is good and well as long as we come from a place of faith first. If we're postured in a position of faithfulness and a belief in a benevolent, loving, unconditional God universe that we live in, it's like it's liberating, man. And so on that front, there's starting there, and then doing all of, there's obviously the habits and the things that are required to really build a foundation of abundance, and really growing on the path of personal evolution. But what I feel is missing is that heart centered in faith and a belief. And without that, none of it is possible. And what I have come to learn in my perspective is, I grew up in a Catholic church, K through 8 school. And so this ideology was really impressed upon me as the way, and it never resonated to me at that time in the way that I could receive it. There was just missing pieces that I didn't understand. And so I just backed away, and I went into an agnostic phase. And that's where all my hedonism happened. That's where I was boozing and, drinking and doing all the drugs and doing all the things. And then when I, recognized that that series of addictions could have led me to dying under a bridge. I could have been dead. What actually should have broken me led to my breakthrough. And that's when I just started to like, okay, I didn't do this. Like this is so much more than me, and having to let go of like my absolute control, and knowing that like I have it all figured out, or I have to know or do more constantly to be enough. It's like that's the motto of the modern church, the Western church, is try harder. It's a carrot and not a stick, a wrathful and merciful God that will punish you for your sins. And instead, I come from a place where even when I was covered in dirt and doing all of these things that aren't in line with my true soul and spirit, God was still there for me. And he was fascinated with me even in those moments. And enough evidence of that over time, and built resilience. Obviously doing my own work, tracking, doing the habits, doing all of the things to develop myself to be able to receive the abundance that is available through the lens of a higher power. And I totally lost the thread on the question, but I feel like the missing piece is first checking in with your God, your higher power, and acting and being from that place. And over time, the vices fall away. It's just honoring a yes vow to be more in line with my faith in my God. And all of a sudden, there's just not as strong of a pull. And then that's where our personal power comes in, and our free will and the habits that we've built can give us the tools and the resources and the community that I have, you and I have. We have other brothers and men and elders who can shepherd us in through these times of darkness, when we want to return to the porn and just the life draining, sucking energy that stuff is. And frankly, it's just gotten so much easier over time. It's a knowing that my energy doesn't belong there. And the pull isn't as strong. Sure, I still think about some of these stuff, but after having been clean and sober for over 2.5 years, I'm not counting. It's like, that's just, it's not sticky anymore. Like, and it doesn't have anything to stick onto. It's like, it just kind of moves through me in a way that I'm bigger than now. So I again, not the most practical, and we can drill in, but it's just posturing from faith first, man. And then from there, knowing that when we fall, and having grace and a God that's going to help us through that tough time, whatever that looks like, That's it for me, man.
I resonate with a lot of that. I really do. I think where I want to go with that is when I first got in, I had grown up Catholic and my dad was Jewish, right? So we grew up going to church and all that, and it did not resonate with me as well. And I fell away and I fell into that hedonism. And when I was finding my way back, when I got in 12 step and they were like, you are going to have to find your own higher power. We can't tell you what it is, but you have to find it. I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean higher power? Like, what? Right. And I didn't understand. I couldn't fathom giving up control of like the direction of my life to something I couldn't even see. And especially at like a time in your life when you're supposed to be grinding and going and getting stuff done and figuring it out. And I talked to a lot of other guys, around my age, and they look at me like I'm crazy when I say these things now. So how do you think is a good way to start going about finding your relationship with your higher power? Because I know for me, I had to find it through other people. I couldn't do it on my own. So kind of curious what your opinion is on that.
That's a fantastic question. And I think all of us know,
Mm,
whether we choose to believe it or not, we all know that this isn't a freaking accident.
mm,
So it's trust your knowing. And for you at the time, it was connecting with other people who had a stronger base of faith. Start there. The one thing that I feel is the churches that I was a part of provide, like, that structure was built for, was almost a middleman to God, to our higher power. Like, we had to go check in with this system to then achieve our blessings and all of that. And
mm,
that's just no longer true. I don't know that it ever was, but we don't have to go and seek this outside of ourselves. It's available within and all around us at all times.
mm,
And so, again, I'm not, floating over here. I'm not, and I have my moments,
mm,
and it's whether it's finding it through an AA community or a sobriety based community. I have personally in Austin, Texas, tried multiple churches, gone to multiple different types of services to feel what resonates with me,
mm,
and what feels good. Like, do I feel God when I am with this? Does this sermon or this preacher make me feel like I'm closer to God? And so it's cultivating an amount of discernment and awareness within myself. It's like, oh wow, that feels really true to me. I'm gonna keep doing that. And then over time, it's just like anything else. You can get better at it.
mm,
And then all of a sudden, I'm having intimate communion with God on a daily basis. And I receive blessings in speed, in instant time. It's like, I don't want to get too woo-woo or anything about it, but it's really finding a church or community that can introduce you to some of these concepts and being open-minded, because
mm,
really it's like, even reading the Bible, that's passed through generations and thousands of hands, and who knows. So it's giving back our own power to a commune and create a personal relationship with our higher power.
mm,
It doesn't need a name. You don't have to tell everybody about it. It can be a truly intimate, sacred connection that doesn't require, a church or a religion. You can, yeah, it can be found in holy books, or it can be found in nature. It can be found in intimate, deep connection with, that we're having right now. It's
mm,
like, it can be found in the space between the breath and, in between all of the doing that we're constantly, taking time to be still and in silence, and learning from, other people. And yeah, I could keep riffing, but community, man, community, I think, is the simplest way to do it. And when I was coming out of my stupor,
mm,
in terms of the drugs and addictions and all of that, there was only one man that I just could feel something different about him that I knew in my life. And I grabbed onto him, bro. I was like, man, give me some of what you have. And it
mm,
started by just clawing away at this version of myself that I knew was possible. And now, after 4 or 5 years, it's like, I'm introducing ceremony into everyday life. and how I cook and
Mm.
and how I give unconditional love and try to be in the spirit as much as I can, because that's just such a potent and profound and powerful way to navigate life that I haven't found any better way to do it. So
Mm.
it's like, if I have to give up a semblance of control or knowing, like I'm okay with that at this point, because I've received so many incredible things in my life that or were better than what I thought that I wanted for myself. So it's surrendering to God's plan, and meeting other people where they're at in that,
Mhm.
and continuing to be compassionate, and curious about it, man, because I'm learning every minute of every day. It's like
Mm.
you've got wisdom to share that you're speaking to a generation of men that I'm past my prime, bro. Like you've got something beautiful, and you're in your youth. You've already accumulated so much wisdom, through what it is that you've lived through. And so, yeah, it's just having these conversations and bringing God into them
Mm.
always in all things that we do. So I know, again, not very practical, but here for it.
No, it's a tough challenge, man. I mean, even today, I was struggling with, giving up control, and I had a little bit of a slip with, one of mine is food, and had a little bit of a slip today, but here for it. I'm gonna keep on trudging along. But I think a hard thing I hear a lot of guys talk about, especially what I learned, was learning to sit with ourselves in silence. That was such a hard thing for me to do. I'm ADHD. I was always on my phone or wanting to play Xbox, or I had to be constantly distracted, because the thought to me of sitting in silence by myself for 5 minutes was the most painful thing on planet Earth. I would rather have fought a war than do that.
Yeah.
Why do you think so many young men struggle with sitting in silence and just listening to the inner texture of their own mind?
Oh, God, such a good question. I also relate to that, bipolar, anxiety, depression. The thought of sitting with my feelings was my worst nightmare.
Mm.
And that's what I was reaching for all these externals to numb from and suppress. So I understand that. And that's where mindfulness comes in. And it's not simply meditation.
Mhm.
I literally think we are evolving as a species where it's just a lot harder for younger people to do that in stillness. And there's a whole host of factors societally, culturally, that are creating that. And there's other ways to do it. It doesn't necessarily require you to sit in meditation and have your yoga hands and be still.
Mhm.
I encourage everyone to do that and try that for themselves,
Mhm.
because that simple practice of just returning to the present moment despite whatever it is that comes up, that is presence in a nutshell. And so cultivating that through mindful meditation or silence of some kind is important, specifically for men. I'll just, because I know that.
Mhm.
And yet over time I've just realized, like, I can sit, I can do that, and I'm not doing it to be a good meditator. I'm speaking
Mhm.
of practicalities. Like, I love to just do that, but it's not really practical for me. It's not my practical spirituality. I like to move energy through breath in a similar mindful way. So that's just kind of what I've evolved from. But I had to start by, okay, here's my habit tracker. I know I'm a man who wants to be a meditator. So, okay, keeping myself accountable to this, I'm going to sit down, and whether it's guided or just being in stillness with my own thoughts, 5 minutes today. Okay, I only did 2 minutes. Damn, I'll do better next time. you know Not beating myself over with the stick on this. It's
Mhm.
like, I'm proud of myself for even doing the thing, doing the minimum, doing my best in that moment, and then just going again tomorrow. And I'm not here to tell anybody they have to meditate, but it's the practice of cultivating a sense of mindfulness,
Mhm.
returning to the present moment, that's so important. And you can do that in nature. You can do that through breath work or movement or community and intimate dialogue. There's, infinite ways. Um, but I just relate. It's really hard to sit still, man. There's so much going on. It's a challenge. And we're so quick to just pick up a phone and make all of our just shrink into that context. So it's a challenge, and it's one that we're here to stand for. It's like, if a man, specifically just a man, if I can't sit and control myself for 5 minutes, what the fuck, man?
Mm,
Straight up, like, how am I going to trust you if
mm,
you can't sit still for 5 minutes and
mhm.
listen to your own thoughts? So I don't mean to comment, I have to bring sort of the older brother in me at times where it's like, guys, your feelings aren't going to kill you. I thought that they would, and I had to have enough experience and evidence to prove myself otherwise. But the answer isn't in the drugs or the porn or the alcohol or whatever. It's in the practice of cultivating that stillness and silence and that mindfulness. It's by doing the thing.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's funny. I remember I went to my first breathwork session, and during the breathwork class, I got the T-Rex arms really bad because I literally couldn't extend them past my chest, and the whole time it was crazy. I was having this sensation just to like leave class and just go eat shitty food to feel better. Like that safety blanket was kicking in, and I was like, no, I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna feel this, I'm gonna do it. And I did it, and I broke through, and I just like bawled my eyes out for 20 minutes, right? And I connected with those feelings and that pain I had underneath, and I sat with it, and it didn't kill me, and I
Yes.
survived. And the relief I felt, the neural mechanisms are still there, right? Like I had a slip today, but the desire to do it is gone.
Yeah.
And that's what really matters, right? What I learned, especially in 12 step, is you keep showing up whether you want to or not, and eventually you will get there. I think the problem is a lot of guys expect themselves just to get it,
Yeah.
right? Within a month or
No.
2 months. And that's just not how it works, right? It takes time and patience, but we've been told that you should be able to get this within a month or 2 months. And that patient, who has time for patience? I don't have time for
Mm.
patience, right? And I see them just whipping themselves over the back. If I talk to some buddies and they tell me the things they say to themselves, and I'm like, if you would talk to me that way, we would not be friends. So why is it our inner voice? Why is it so many young men's inner voice are so like their inner bully or their abusive parent or the mean teacher? Why does that happen? Why do we internalize this super self-critical voice?
Yeah. So, another incredible question. So, in my experience, I've recently taken a trauma informed certification. So it's really enlightened me on how I perceive and notice, my mental health and addiction past.
Hmm.
And, it sometimes it takes a gentler approach to some of these things. But specifically to the thought piece, why I bring in the trauma informed pieces, because I've learned a lot about the nervous system and how, we experience traumatic events
Hmm.
per se, and that just leaves an imprint on our mind, body, and soul.
Hmm.
And those the suppressed feelings and emotions that we bottled down and numbed through all of these vices and things and all of the activities that aren't allowing us to fully feel, those just get stuck up in our bodies. And essentially, this is one way of thinking about it. A framework is like our mind, where those thoughts are coming from are coming up from our body.
Hmm.
Our bodies, and if it's got stored in it so much of this suppressed, numb, not enough, work harder, do more, then yeah, that's going to continue to reinforce those thought patterns. And if we're not taking new action to create those different neural pathways and new evidence for us to celebrate and ground into, it's going to perpetuate the cycles that were often started when we were kids,
Hmm.
from our parents, our families of origins, our schools, our churches, our sports teams, where these metrics for success were all based on accomplishment or doing or achievement and money and power and things that I've objectively achieved and haven't brought me any sense of peace or fulfillment.
Hmm.
And so there's advanced ways to go about it. I really think it's like, okay, posturing ourselves in faith and feeding that more with our thoughts and our diet, not just physical diet, but everything we consume.
Hmm.
Really just, I've immersed myself in spiritual and personal development for the last 4 or 5 years. It's just been my job. for lack of a better word. And it's what I do. It's who I am. And I don't tune into media. I don't, like mainstream media. I don't play into politics. I don't, feed into and give my energy to any of these things that are keeping me in this stuck place, in these toxic thought patterns. And, it's a scary place to live, man. I lived in there for 10 or 12 years. And, it wasn't enough to speak to it in therapy. It wasn't enough to drown it in the bottom of a bottle. I had to start sharing this with a compassionate witness, somebody that actually cared, and who loved me and wanted to see me better. So I could let down some of this shame and this guilt that I haven't figured it all out. I didn't get it figured out in a month. I'm still having to be humbled and patient in this process because there's still so much I don't know. And there's, and one other thing I do want to say that's a little bit out there, but it's like, just ask yourself, is this mine? Is this thought really mine? Because we can't solve a problem that's not ours.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much societal sickness and pain and family. Like, so much of my baggage is from my mother and my father. And I just took on so much of their patterns and processes and thoughts that aren't mine. And I've had to do a lot of the work to try to clear this stuff out and then make room for more me and more God,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, yeah, you got to do some of the stuff to clear out these negative thoughts. And so, you can do that, or you can just feed yourself from the fire hose of faith. And there's, everybody's on their own journey to this, but I don't want to make it seem too light about the thoughts, man, because it kept me so caged into my mind, and I didn't want to feel my body, and I didn't know how to process my emotions, so I just stuffed them down.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't feel, I wouldn't communicate my needs or what was actually real for me, and I was just living in this box of my head that was the only safe place that I knew, but it was fucking terrifying, man. Every day it was like I didn't know which I would turn, and then some deep, dark, thought pattern would just slam me over the head and throw me into a depression, or what was the next shoe to drop, or I'm having to just like white knuckle all of my things because I'm in such an anxiety that like I don't got it. I didn't have it, and I didn't for a while, and that's where the habits come in. That's where you got to start and get yourself around men or women that want better for you,
Mm-hmm.
and are going to feed that positivity and your uniqueness. And yeah, start from there, because it's not going to go overnight. But one thing I can confidently tell you where I'm at in my journey, being bipolar for 12 years, heavily medicated, drugs and alcohol. I mean, you run the gamut, bro. And now I've done enough. I don't know. I've done enough, but I'm at a point in my life where
Mm-hmm.
the darkness, it doesn't have more on me than the light.
Mm-hmm.
Like in simplest terms as I can describe it, like the good, I've done enough of the good that overweighs the bad. So the good has more of a pull, and everybody can get there. Everybody, it's possible. Like I didn't know this was possible, but I had to do it day in and day out for years in order to achieve this. And I think part of the reason why we're having these conversations is to shorten the time for other men to get there faster, other men and women, right? Like anybody can get there faster because yeah, it's available to all of us.
Right. Totally understand, dude. I mean, I remember when I first started my journey. I remember the night specifically. I was up in Washington. It was like cold. It was like 32 degrees. I had transferred because I had blown up my life down here. And I remember like one night just acting out twice and then binge eating and just being like, I hate my life and this sucks. And walking outside, and this energy came over me and was like, just call your parents and ask for help. Just make the choice, make the choice, make the choice. And I did. And it got me on the path to here. And what I learned from that is anything you have, every path that you take, any action that you do, any thought that you have is a choice.
Yes.
But so many people do not think that. They think I am my thoughts. I am this amalgamation of my learned experiences. And no matter how much I work, this will never change. This is the way things are. I thought that for a long time. I was going to have to go through life compulsively binge eating every other day, compulsively working out, compulsively acting out to porn and all these things. and just like that was gonna be my life.
Right.
That was my life. I had accepted it until I made the choice for something different. And I
Yes.
talked to a lot of guys, and again, this applies to women too. It's just I can really speak to it from a man's perspective. I feel like men need the power of choice. Choice is very important in my life. And so many guys feel like they have that power taken away from them. They don't have a choice in anything anymore. So of course they're going to have to go to all these external things because they are doing it backwards. They think the external world should reflect the internal world rather than the internal should reflect the external because they've lost that choice. So how do you think we should go about taking back I have a choice in your life?
So powerful, Jacob. Thank you for sharing your story with that, because I deeply resonate. And I think it starts, honestly, with our identity. There's
Mm,
so much here, but I really, in my personal experience, I identified as a bipolar person
mm,
from 18 to about 29. And so that just fed my identity that I was crazy, I was sick, I was broken, and all of my actions came from that place. I resorted on a psychiatrist and a therapist and medication, and I gave away my power kind of unknowingly at the time, but I was trusting these other professionals, these experts, to know me better than I knew myself.
mm,
And I was I guess unwillingly, unknowingly ignorant to the fact that I was giving my power away. And so I began to reclaim my own personal power in that. And it really is a shift from, okay, this all is happening to me to this is happening for me. And that's the shift from victimhood to personal responsibility.
mm,
And once we come from that place and acknowledge that, we live in a free will universe. It's just the facts. We all have choice at any moment to make a new decision. I could hang up this podcast right now if I wanted to. I wouldn't, because this is beautiful. But at any moment, we all
mm,
have choice. And so it's remembering that, man. I
mm,
don't always remember that. And I make bad decisions often, quote, bad decisions, because all of those decisions allow me to reflect upon who the person I want to be is.
mm,
And I remind myself every morning, man, one of the first things I do is I'm just waking my eyes is like, today is like I'm committed to taking full responsibility for everything in my life. It's a mantra. It's a state that I just accept, and it's a way better state to be in than the victimhood state. That I'm just, oh, I'm helpless. I can't control. I don't know what to do. Like, somebody help me. And as men, again, it's critical to step into this through choice into personal responsibility, full responsibility for all of the things in one's life.
mm,
And when I started to do that, that's when I really think everything started to change for me. That's when I stopped needing these external things for internal validation. And I could sleep at night knowing I only meditated for 2 minutes today. But that was the best I had today. And that was my choice to do that. And that's just, one example. And I made a choice for the future me by only instead of doing a cigarette, I did half today. I did instead of having a full cigarette, just put it out a little bit before. And it's these little wins that, as long as we're actually acknowledging the progress towards
mm,
a better and brighter future for ourselves, that's what it takes. These little foundational building blocks over time that eventually produce a solid ground for us to build from. And there's no solid ground in victimhood. There's never any foundation to work from. And so that's what it is about being a man that I have learned through firsthand is we all have this same story, man. We all grow up and we see these older men with fast cars and success in business and something that we don't have.
mm,
They have beautiful women or they have all these things that we perceive to be valuable and beautiful in the world. And we're all younger and we all want that. And it's never quite enough. And so we lose our way and we kind of go our own lone wolf path and hopefully screw up enough times and still survive. And then eventually we kind of recognize that, like, oh man, I've been fucking up. I've been trying to do all this stuff on my own. And usually it happens, like for me, I got success and money stuff and career stuff, but I abused my health.
Mm.
And eventually I was like, this isn't a fair trade, man. I'm not making this trade anymore. And so over time, it was just like, this just isn't working for me. Like really looking myself in the mirror. And it's like, I knew if I continued down the finance and the corporate path, I was like, I saw my future, it was beautiful Golden Gate Bridge views, like living with the gorgeous blonde on the water with the stroller and the golden retriever. But I would have been empty. I would have traded the fulfillment for success. And so, yeah, I kind of gone off again from the original, which I'm sure you're getting the hang of that by now, but it's taking full responsibility for everything in our life.
I think that's truly powerful. It's funny, I used to be a realist, right? Which is just a code word for cynicist. And as I've gone on this journey, I'm an optimist by choice now. And I remember having a conversation with my roommate, and being like, "Remember me in high school? Was I an optimist?" And he kind of thought for a second, and he was like, "No." And I said, "You think I just wake up now and I'm just magically an optimist?" And he was like, "Yeah, honestly, I do." And I was like, "Dude, I just made the decision. I'm going to look on the good side, even if it's crappy." Right? Like I'll look back. I'm grateful for my addiction. I'm grateful for all the struggles I went through when I did, because I am here now a better man for it. Right? And that's the most powerful thing I have gotten out of this is perspective. Another thing, resentment, I have found. One of the biggest key parts of my spirituality has been letting go of resentment. I had resentment towards my parents, towards my youngest brother, towards, all of these things. I resented my dad, the father figure in my life, because he didn't teach me all these things. And then as I got down the path, well, how could he have? Look at his blueprint. Look how much the world has changed from 2000 to 2023. How can I blame him for this? I can't. It's not fair. So what is so powerful about resentment that it just seems to eat up every waking moment of your life?
I just want to also acknowledge just your courage and vulnerability and sharing it how it is, bro, because that's my story too.
Mm-hmm.
I made sure, I made my dad wrong because what he gave me, I didn't learn enough about being a man from him.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to live his path, and I really resented him and hated him for it for years, and have come full circle in that to this very similar tune. It's like he did the best that he could, and in fact, he provided me with incredible opportunity. So being grateful for that and all that I did receive, what I might not have gained in connection or emotional support or teaching or fatherhood or mentorship in that way, I've now gotten that from other men. So there's just, it takes a level of resourcefulness over time. It's like nobody's coming to save us in this, man. It's on us, and that's where choice and responsibility comes in. It's like, if you want to live glued to your Xbox and and have Cheetos dripping down your shirt and drink whatever the story is, it's like that's your choice, and I'm not here to save you from that. I'm just here to hold the light from where I'm at, because the light over here feels good, man. It's better than I've ever felt. So I want to circle back to resentment, because it's not something. It's a potent subject, and a mentor gave me this one time. It was and I want to ask you what resentment means to you and how it shows up in your life, because resentment, I really resonated with this. It was an envy that someone else was perceived from my perspective living in a way that I could not live.
No, that's definitely what I had gathered throughout my life. I had friends who were doing things that I resented because I didn't think I could do them, or athletic ability, or the ability to talk to girls, or their dads were cooler than my dad, right? Like I just would just resent because I felt I had nothing inside. There was nothing, but oh, I could give out this resentment, right? And then that resentment leads to, well, I have no confidence in myself, so I'm going to take from yours. and all you do is just take, right? Because you have just an empty hole that just bred by resentment and just takes from everything else and everyone else in your life. And it's I look back and it's crazy that people actually would stick around because you don't really see how much pain you cause, until you wake up out of a dream, and then you're like, holy crap, why would I ever live like that again? Why would I feel that? It's almost like a demon, right, inside that comes out whenever you get hurt, and it just is like, I'm going to do what you can't, and since you have nothing inside of you, I'm gonna like just steal from everyone around you like this black hole, right, and attribute everything wrong in your life to everyone outside of yourself. That's who's at fault. It's his fault that you failed that test. It's your dad's fault that you couldn't talk to girls. It's your mom's fault that XYZ, right? Like it just never ends because there's always something wrong. There's always something new. There's always a new buck to pass off. And what cured it for me was a mirror, right? When I went to Washington and I had to go away and I had no one to pass that buck off to, and I really had to like get a good look in the mirror at myself, and there was no one else be like boom, 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 boom. That resentment goes away real quick because you start to be like, oh, actually, I did that. I did that. I did that. I did that. But one of the hardest things I've ever do in my life is hold that mirror up and get a good look at the person in the mirror, right? And I think a lot of guys, I was forced to do it. Like I had no option to do it. And a lot of guys, A, are never forced to, and B, if they are, they never actually go through with it, right? They'll hold it and then they'll just dive deeper. So how can we go about holding up the mirror in a way that isn't self-flagellating, but more of taking a fearless moral inventory of ourselves?
It's another wonderful question. What I felt like what I did was put myself in a community in a house of mirrors. And that kept showing up to that over and over and over. I think that's the fastest way is to find a better, obviously a personal mirror, but we're all mirrors for one another and reflecting constantly. And so there's this, I'd rather be in a house where the mirror and reflection is cleaner than from this emptiness, resentment, this take energy. It's like, of course, that's coming from the victimhood and there's so much there. And how I shifted that was just starting to give just a little bit, whether it's a compliment or a tip or a kind word, a text message. It's like starting to feed the bank a little bit more of the positivity of that optimism. And to your point, it's like this path isn't for everyone. And I'm having to really reconcile myself with that because I'm like, no man left behind. Like, let's fucking go. It's, we're here. Let's do this together, hand in hand. And I'm recognizing that at a certain point, every man can choose. And the mirror is always going to be available for me and others. It's always there. Quite literally picking up a mirror and looking yourself in the eye and honestly seeing who that man is in front of you. I did that for years, mirror work. I mean, I literally reframed some of those thoughts in the mirror. Sometimes I was yelling myself in the mirror. Sometimes I was crying. Sometimes I was ashamed at my body. Sometimes I was, picking myself apart. Oh, you don't have big enough pecs or biceps. Like allowing that, and enough evidence is like, okay, it's not going to kill me. I'm actually way more powerful than any of these singular thoughts that I thought. And so obviously there's ways to have mirrors. You can go find support, find one other man, one other person, one family member who's able to come from that give and not take energy. Like that's it. Because if you just are going to continue to be engaged in a mirror that, whether it's yourself or with another, that's going to be continuing to take from you, it's going to repattern. But somebody with enough compassionate presence, just a little bit of unconditional love, it goes so far. And so it's like, we as men, at least me, I felt like I had to do it alone for so long, and it's just not the way. It's not the way we're moving forward as a collective and as a human species, and how we're going to survive and thrive. Even tomorrow, it's like I I have dozens of men that I love and trust, that I respect their feedback, and I honor what they have, their truth, and what it is that they tell me. So get yourself around a community that you respect, that's got something there for you, and go for that and leave the rest, man. It's better than, just continuing to sit in these stuck thoughts that suck, and these addictions that are awful and drain your soul and your passion. It's a slippery slope, man. And I just continue to show up. So
Yeah, I hear you. I know it's the thought that men are supposed to do everything on their own, right? Like in Hollywood, the lone wolf is the cool guy. He gets the girl, he gets the car, right? And in real life, that's just not how we're wired, right? Men evolved to hunt in groups and bond and be together. And that's when I found I've been most connected to my higher power or powerful, is like I have a brother to my left and a brother to my right, and we're just in it together, and we're like, yeah, right. And the opposite of addiction is community.
ooh,
Right.
love that.
And there's another really good one I saw, which is most men today perceive themselves to be martyrs. Right.
Yes, that's
They
that victimhood.
right. They live the lives of quiet suffering for other people. And I read a really good book, and he talked about how you can be a martyr and your only value is your death, or you can be the hero of your story and your value is your life. Right. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And when you start living for other people, you can do a lot more for them than if you're dying for them on the inside. Right. And I mean, when you just look at the crisis of masculinity that we're in, right? Toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call it. I don't think there's too much. I think there's not enough, right? There's this vacuum, and we have men who sell the flashy car or the pretty girl, and just because it's hard to get doesn't mean it's valuable. It just means it's hard to get, right?
True.
But there seems to be a directionless generation of men
Yes.
who are checking out of reality, living in their heads, and then also checking out from dating, right?
Yeah.
I have heard that out the wazoo from my friends who are girls. They can't find a date, they can't do X, they can't do Y, and it's affecting the balance of masculine energy and feminine energy. And we wonder why society seems to be off the rails. Well, look around. Look at just the average guy nowadays. Like if you keep yourself clean, if you work out 3 times a week, if you have a job and don't live in your parents' basement, you're doing really well, which is a sad thing to say.
It's weird.
Because
Yeah.
even if you have that mental health, even if you have that physical health or that financial health, if you don't have spiritual health, it don't mean jack shit, right? Because you can have all that and crash and burn. And so many guys do not understand that, right? They like, for example, at the office I work at, I just see caffeine everywhere and shitty food and just the things you have to do to keep going at this pace that is not meant for humans. Like you're supposed to be a robot. And I think that's what a lot of guys get stuck on, is they're so used to that pace in life. And this is the pace of wisdom, which is a very slow process, right?
Ooh.
So how did you transfer from the pace of modern life to the pace of wisdom?
Slowly, with a lot of patience and grace.
Mm,
In my study of the nervous system, that is an entirely different lens than everything I came to know in my mental health and addiction.
mm,
Everything that I learned from the Western standard of care, what that all meant to me, was fed to me from one perspective. And the nervous system perspective is that I've been sort of stuck in a fight or flight state. So quite literally, I've been on overdrive in that doing, in that chase for success. And it's taken me a lot of repatterning in this season of life, man. You know, I love to lift. It's fun. I enjoy it at the MPB workouts I in here in Austin. And I've had to sacrifice going to those types of workouts because slowing down in this season of my life has required an entire lifestyle change. Like fundamentally, you know, I can't go even do the same training I love to do and have done for many years because my body's wanting to slow down. I feel it so much now that when I overactivate myself, it's just like, oh there, brother. Yeah, and I get thrown. I have to rest. I get depressed. These things show up very quickly for me now when I'm not honoring my own pace. And you said something so beautifully, like the pace of wisdom is slow. It truly is. It doesn't necessarily have to be after a certain point, but attuning to that requires you, and certainly required me to, yes, like breathe, like chew my food, like only do one thing at a time. As humans, as I'm 33 years old speaking to you now, we're not designed to multitask. It just doesn't work well. And when we're hopped up on caffeine and Adderall and whatever the counter of that is to go to sleep, and pot to make us this or what, it's a jacked up cocktail of our bodies, man. And so it's like everyone gets a choice in this. We can choose to perpetuate these habits that are going to lead to burnout and inevitable, breakdown, whether it's mental, physical, addiction, relapse. It's just inevitable at that pace. Or it's listening to our bodies, attuning with God, taking full responsibility for our life, getting it around a better community of men and like-minded women. It's moving our bodies in a way that feels good for us. It's eating the best food, drinking the best water we can afford, and not trading our well-being for dollars and cents. It's like there's a new way to do it. And I didn't know that. Man. And I had to go to the bottom of the coal mine to find this myself. And that's what it's all about, is sharing these little diamonds that unfortunately, based in the world we live in the society that exists, isn't supportive for us to shine like the diamonds we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I'll look around at work when I refuse to partake in that pace, or I refuse to sacrifice my mental health for the job. And I look around, and a couple of weeks ago, I remember feeling really insecure, being like, everyone else was going a lot faster than me, right? And then as the weeks progressed, everyone else started to kind of slow down a little bit, and I was still going at my pace. And then eventually, my pace, steady enough, surpassed them. And like, I'm hearing a lot of burnout and crash, right? And just not like, and I was so insecure about it, like, because I was not willing to sacrifice my mental health or my physical health for dollars and cents, like stuff I literally can't even touch, right? Or won't even matter in 5 years, right? Like, what's the point? If I am not physically healthy or emotionally healthy, then no job is worth it, right? They could fire me tomorrow and that would be it. But so many young kids just feel this pressure, right? The pressure to, I have to go, I have to work harder, because we're all fighting. It's a dog eat dog world, right? It's not I'm going to help you, help me, right? It's like we're all disconnected. There's such this mass disconnection from reality and from the world. And I think it's because we're so disconnected from ourselves at such a fundamental level. That's been the most practical thing I have found. If anyone gets anything from this podcast, practically the best thing you can do is find who you are again. Because if you can do that, you can do anything, right? Like I wrote out who I am and who I try to be every day, and I read that every morning. It's I am statements, not what I'm not trying to be. Because
Yes.
if you try to be something you're not, you're always looking behind you from the monster you're running at, and you don't know where you're going.
Yes.
Right.
Precisely.
So I just kind of want to end with this, how do you find who you are without being ashamed of who you think you are?
The word that comes up is experience. And we've touched on patience and the process and the space of wisdom and just an acceptance that it's going to take time for this next greater, better version of you and I to evolve. And it's trusting the process and knowing it's we're doing our best, and it's remembering there's no shame in the game, man. We're all here for a specific and unique purpose, and there's no other way to do it other than to experience it for ourselves. No one else can tell us that or communicate to that. It's about, as you said, kind of returning to who we are, and I think that starts with a knowing and a remembrance of, I mean, we're God's children. We're all these beautiful souls that arrived here on this planet that started perfect. And then we became this way based on our families and jobs and schools and all of these things that just brought us away from who we are now. And once you can accept how far we've come and how much we've strayed away from the infinite nature that we are and the potential that we have as individuals, it becomes a lot easier to move forward when you have that knowing. And again, not really the most practical, but again, if I were to say something and give you advice, that would be taking away from your choice, your personal power and your path and your journey to figure it out for yourself. There's no one way. There's infinite, all streams lead to the same ocean. And so as long as we're flowing downstream, just enjoy the ride.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. It's a pleasure to talk to you. People want to keep up with you. Where should they go?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram at I am Andrew Newton. Would love to connect there.
Awesome. Well, hope everyone enjoyed, and we will see you next time.
Peace.
Hey everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. If you have questions or comments, please feel free. I'm open to any feedback. I hope you got a lot out of this. I know I did. Capacity. All you do is keep coming back. Looking forward to seeing you next time.